There are many differences between learning languages as a student and as a polyglot, especially for students who only know one language, like English. When only beholding one language, it is possible to develop some abilities, but not on the same level as a polyglot. A person who knows only one language is monolingual, but a polyglot is someone who knows 5 or more, and there are vast differences between them. In this video, I'm not going to say that it's bad to learn languages when you only know one language, because you can base it on the language that you know. The point is that having multiple languages in your head develops faster thinking skills and better memorization than having only one language. Students who only speak one language are always focused on perfection, especially if they're pressured to not make any mistakes. For polyglots, however, making mistakes is part of the process because you will later focus on correcting yourself once you have a sufficient amount of knowledge. For instance, you can have two students who learn Spanish, with the first focused on not making mistakes starting on day 1, and the other only learning a few concepts. After about a month, the first student will have problems speaking because they were focused too much on grammar, which is not the way to go. On the other hand, the second student will go from saying nothing to freely expressing their thoughts and saying any sentence on a conversational level. When learning a new language as monolinguals, many students are focused on perfection and too many grammatical concepts. I am not saying that it's bad to learn languages like that, because many students only speak one language, like English, and therefore the process becomes more difficult for them. Nonetheless, they have to start somewhere, but when comparing monolinguals to polyglots, there are a lot of differences, one of which is the inability to understand new languages as they get older. The reason why it's hard is not because languages are hard, it's because they only speak one language for so long that they cannot understand different concepts that deviate from their native language. And that's something that you have to look out for, but on the other side of the spectrum, monolingual students can amplify their way of thinking and learn what is it like to learn languages as a polyglot. The amazing thing about polyglots is that most of them are self-taught, which makes the learning process more fitting for them, especially for the ones that have different learning methods. I would even say that most polyglots share one common learning procedure, which is the emphasis on speaking and listening. In all aspects of monolinguals, they're focused on many grammatical ideas, and not that it's bad, but it's simply too much. Polyglots are focused more on listening and speaking as opposed to reading and writing, because they know that speaking and listening are the two elements that will be used the most in a conversation. Another difference in polyglots is that they make mistakes when speaking, and they do not try to be perfect from the beginning, as I've mentioned in the previous video. Polyglots allow themselves to make mistakes, and they do not focus on perfection because they start from nothing and eventually move on to expressing any thought and put together sentences using different words, and only from there do they start focusing on perfection. On the opposite side, monolingual students are forced to be perfect from the beginning, which is a bad way to start because they don't know where to start to begin with. Another very significant difference in polyglots is that they use different concepts from different languages, which allows them to multitask, making the learning process even simpler than before. As someone who's learning German, I can tell you that German is simpler to understand through Russian than Spanish is through English. The reason why is because Russian and German are more similar than people think, especially when it comes down to expressions, as opposed to Spanish and English. The only problems I'm having in German are the order of the words in any sentence and knowing in what case to use the articles. Beyond that, polyglots have one final insight, which is the most important concept, and that is combining elements of learning with efficiency. Polyglots become more successful when learning languages on their own because they're using multiple languages in unison, allowing them to understand multiple concepts in one take. This is also known as the lazy method of just non-stop translation and memorization, which eventually turns into fluency. This can also explain why learning languages as a monolingual student can be problematic because you only know one language, not being able to understand different concepts. And that's the key element: efficiency through other languages. As an example, whenever I learn Spanish at the university that I attend, some concepts can be complicated because they're simply too excessive. On the other hand, after teaching myself German for a few hours, Spanish all of a sudden becomes the easiest thing ever because I moved from one efficient level to the other. This goes to show that polyglots have it easier than most people due to their knowledge of multiple languages. Not to say that monolingual students have it hard, but I feel like they simply need to be educated in a different way. As an experiment, you can have one student who's forced to learn every grammatical concept of a language, but on the other hand, you can have a different student who learns how to speak and how to listen in a language, and that student will understand the language at a minimal and conversational level. In the beginning, not everyone can be a polyglot, especially monolinguals, but that's perfectly okay because they get to learn other concepts that they're interested in. Learning languages at a young age can be very beneficial, especially for polyglots and for people like me, because they get to use different concepts to understand different languages. That's also the reason why my content is fit for people who only speak English, because they get to understand other languages from a different perspective. Once you've mastered 2 or 3 languages, from there, you can focus on thinking like a polyglot. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you learned something from this video.